Our scripture reading this morning comes from Mark chapter 22, or chapter 14, verse 22 through 24. While they were eating, he took a loaf of bread, and after blessing it, he broke it, gave it to them, and said, "Take, this is my body." Then he took a cup, and after giving thanks, he gave it to them, and all of them drank from it. And he said, "This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many." Would you please pray with me? And now, God, may the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable to you, our rock and our redeemer. Amen. Today's a special day in what has come to be known as the ecumenical movement. The ecumenical movement being that which calls Christians together. Instead of the differences that have separated us literally for millennia. I mean, the first great schism was in the 11th century. Instead of looking at the things that have separated us, to look at the thing that draws us together. And so it was in the 1930s that a Presbyterian church decided they would call everybody around the table with one another. A few years later, the Federal Council of Churches, what we now know as the National Council of Churches, instituted it as Worldwide Communion Sunday. And slowly but surely, each of their member churches, 38 different communions, came together and decided on this day, the first Sunday in October, we would forget about the things that separate us, and we would come here to the table together. And so we read from Mark's Gospel what we call the words of institution. The words that started this. What we hear in Mark's Gospel is this was a Passover meal. This was not something strange or unusual. This is something that they came together and did every year. And this time when they sat down, Jesus said something that was a little different. There's a liturgy that goes along with the Passover Seder, and if you've ever been to one, it's very interesting. It recalls the journey out of Egypt and into the Promised Land. And as part of that, they take bread, and they bless it, and they break it, and they share it with everybody who comes together. Oftentimes we like to think this is a Christian thing where we break bread and share it with one another, but the Jewish liturgies and the stories tell us that it's happened for centuries before Jesus. That they would take bread and that they would bless it, and they would give it to everybody who came near. Everybody who walked by got a piece of bread. Jesus took it and did something else. And so in churches now, churches throughout the world, churches throughout history, have taken bread and they said those words that Jesus took bread and he blessed it and he broke it in his tradition. And then he gave it to those who were gathered with him, and it's become part of our tradition. And so 12 hours ago, on the other side of the world, people were breaking bread together. And 12 hours from now, on the other side of the world, people will be breaking bread together. Celebrating that thing that calls us together. Celebrating that thing which we each do. We do it in different ways. Sometimes we have herbal tea and steamed bread. Some people come to an altar. Some come to a banister and kneel. Some come with their hands open and the bread is placed in their hands. Some come like we do and take a piece and dip it into the cup. Some take the cup and drink from it. Some stay where they're seated and a tray is passed between them. Some only do the bread. Some only do the cup. Some only do Welch's. That's another story. Some use wine. Some use white grape juice. I've been to youth camps where they've done whatever they wanted to do. In recognition that what happened that night that Jesus gathered with the disciples, what happened right then was they took the things that they normally had on the table. A loaf of bread and a thing of wine. And in that process, Jesus said, "This is who I am for you. Use this." And some people take it literally. And once it's been consecrated and once it's been taken, they believe it literally becomes the flesh and the blood of Christ, filling them, sanctifying them. Some see it as a memorial service where we come up and we remember. Some are very solemn and go back to their seats and meditate and pray. Some see it as a celebration and walk away in the love of Christ. Some come quietly. Some come bashfully. Some come seeking forgiveness. Some come needing just to belong. But we all come to this table. We all come celebrating at this table. We all come to break bread with one another. And yes, there will be significant differences in the ways that we do it, just like there are significant differences in who we are as people. Some only let those who are members of that particular church partake in the table. Some let only those who have been baptized. Some let only those who are members of that church. Some let children and infants and whoever walks the doors come. But the thing is, today, we're all doing it together. We're recognizing that those things that separate us aren't as important as the things that draw us together. The love of Christ. The hope that in the breaking of bread, we are made whole. That the things that we do, that the places we've been that tear us down, that deconstruct what it means to be human, will lift us back up and give us that hope so that we can take that into the world. And then when we do that, we have one more step, and that is to take that into the world. Passion. We've seen throughout history that churches argue, that churches fight, that churches split. As we said, the first great schism was in the 11th century when the Orthodox and the Catholics decided to go in their separate ways. But it didn't just stop then. It happened throughout history. And in the 16th century, we see a Reformation. But it couldn't just be a reformation of one group against another. It was a reformation with hundreds of different things happening throughout. And then we see even ourselves a unity movement that we've split 3 times in our history. Because we're passionate about our faith. Because we're passionate about different things in our faith. Because we're passionate about where it takes us. Because we're passionate about what it calls us to do. And today is no less passionate. Just because we put down those differences, just because we take up this communion of unity, doesn't mean that we forget who we are. It means that we recognize that we have others around us who are struggling in the same ways that we are. I have this app on my phone called Time Hop. Does anybody have Time Hop on their phone? I know some of you do, right? I got it because Lori said, hey, you're going to love this. It is kind of interesting. Because it shows me pictures that I put on Facebook and Twitter and other things, or that are just on my phone, that I've done over the past year. And this morning as I was looking through Time Hop, this one came up. I love the picture. But it reminded me, that's what I think this table is about. Promoting what we love. Too often it's those things that separate us that become the focus of who we are. Too often it's the things that we disagree with that become the definition of what I am as a person. Too often it's those things that tear us apart, that we embrace, that we hold on to. And those things truly are destructive. Nothing has ever been built, no community has ever been saved through hate. Only through love. And so when we come to this table, like so many others throughout the world, billions throughout the world, when we come to this table, it's not a table of dissension, it's not a table of hate, it's a table of love. Of love and ultimate sacrifice so that we could take that love into the world around us. Tex Sample is now he's a retired seminary professor. He's written multiple books. One of the books that he wrote, he's at St. Paul's in Lutheran Seminary in Kansas City. One of the things that he wrote in a book was what is common in community is not shared values or common understanding, so much as the fact that members of the community are engaged in the same argument, in which alternative strategies, misunderstandings, conflicting goals, and values are thrashed out. I remember in a class I took on marriage counseling that the couple that comes in and say we never argue is the couple that needs your help the most. Because when we are passionate, we disagree. When we are passionate about what we love, we tend to disagree. When we are passionate about the person sitting next to us, we tend to disagree. When there are those things that seem to separate us, I think that passion that we feel is truly the thing that brings us together. Because it's in that working out, that common view, that understanding of the world as a whole, that we find who we are and we promote what we love instead of bashing what we hate. Today at the table, we're going to break bread just like we do every Sunday. You're going to be invited to come forward just like you do every Sunday. But when you do so, I ask that you think of something different. Instead of just what it means to you, think about what it means for people throughout the world. People who are free to come forward, people who do so in secret, people who are broken and searching for healing, people who just need to be forgiven and loved.